Welcome to Awesome Video Game Memories, where we talk about awesome video game events. I'm Ryan, and the event we're going to talk about today is E3. Now, I didn't release this video back earlier this year in 2023 when E3 was cancelled because I wanted to wait for my 10-year anniversary of when I first went to E3 in 2013, and I can't believe it's been a decade since then. So I'm going to start with my own personal history with E3 and how I actually got to go. So back in 1995, when I was in the 8th grade and a month away from graduating junior high, I first saw E3 in magazines like Game Players, EGM, and Nintendo Power and told myself, I'm gonna go to E3 one day. It looks like absolute heaven for gamers. So over the years, my friends would tell me that E3 was this magical place where you can play games early, like months early or years early. Celebrities go there, and if you remember Bleem, the original PlayStation emulator, a friend of mine started this rumor around E3 1998 or 1999. Sony cursed out and trashed Bleem's booth, but I'm pretty sure that this was just BS my friend would always make up, but he sounded so convincing and believable at the time. But if any of you in the comments know any truth about this, let me know because it sounds like a really funny story. So E3 is very different than a standard video game convention with panels, events, and a dealer's room. There's actually very little cosplay or none at all aside from the costume characters who work at the booths. It's more of a business trade show where the general public wasn't allowed in since they didn't sell tickets to the event, and it was a place for game companies to have gigantic booths to show off their games so they can attract business retailers and talk with journalists of major outlets like GameSpot, IGN, etc. And in order to get in, you needed to show credentials that you were part of the game industry, whether you're a developer, artist, CEO, journalist, if you own a mom-and-pop game shop, or if you're a GameStop employee, etc. However, this was very loose because I saw a lot of people from the movie industry, Funimation, back when Crunchyroll was Funimation, and even people from the healthcare industry get into E3. And back in the year 2000, my late dad was working for an adhesives company, and he went with his co-workers for a day who got the passes, but he didn't know anything about gaming, so when I asked my dad how E3 2000 was, he was like, it was cool, son. Yeah, those Nintendo games you like, yeah. And I guarantee you that 90% of the people who go to E3 just leech off the credentials from a friend in the gaming industry and use their info to register, just like I did. So Bob, who works at McDonald's, can actually use his friend's info from Microsoft and say that he's tagging along as a cameraman, and he was able to get access into E3. Way to go, Bob. But even if you're not a developer, a journalist, or anyone who works in the industry, you'll still have a lot of fun being there, just being able to play games early, looking at the cool booths, and meeting like-minded gamers, and having fun at the infamous after parties. So my very first opportunity to actually go to E3 was in 2004, when a friend of mine who was working for a gaming website as a journalist told me that he can get me the badge for E3 2004 only if I can provide a place for him and his 10 other friends to crash. Since I was renting a room at the time, I wasn't going to tell my landlord that I was going to have 10 other people sleeping in my room or in the living room for about a week, and I was contemplating on having them stay at my old room at my parents' house, which definitely cannot hold 10 people, and I didn't want to burden my parents or my landlord at the time, so my plans to go to E3 2004 pretty much fell through and I never spoke to my friend again, which I'm still apologizing for nearly 20 years later since I was a poor college student. E3 2013, my first one. So my next opportunity was 9 years later in 2013 when BattleGeek Plus was about a year and a half old, and another friend of mine messages me and asks if I'm going to E3 that year. I told him I don't have the credentials to go, and he told me why not apply with BattleGeek Plus. We had about 300 to 500 subscribers at the time, so I sent in my info at the E3 registration site along with the BattleGeek Plus website and got rejected. So my friend tells me that he'll contact his friend who owns an indie gaming company to use their credentials for E3, and this is how I met Josh Hughes from Team Kaizen / Attitudes Entertainment, who are a huge reason why I got back into game development, and I used their credentials for the first 7 years I went to E3, and him, his brother Trevor, and their mom Cindy are still very good friends with me to this day. So Josh gives me all the Team Kaizen / Attitudes Entertainment credentials from his company to apply with, and we say we're videographers, and after a week, I finally get the email saying your E3 industry badge has been approved and we're looking forward to seeing you at the show. And holy crap, man, that wish I made back in 1995 to actually go to E3 when E3 first started had finally come true after 18 years. So me and my old BattleGeek Plus crew, Josie, Heather, and Frank and I, were finally able to go to E3 2013, baby! And I remember Heather's relatives back in the Midwest were jealous of her going to E3, and Frank, who doesn't really get excited about things very much, was actually really excited that he was going to his first E3, and this is how impactful going to E3 was on all of us. Also, at the same time after registering for E3, I got an invite to Sony's press conference at the Los Angeles Memorial Stadium to see the reveal of the PS4. Holy crap, not only was I going to E3 for the first time, I was going to see the PS4 revealed live on stage. So in June of 2013, since the Sony press conference was on day 0, which was a day before E3 officially started, I drove to the LA Convention Center early to pick up my E3 badge, and while there were people there getting things all set up, security was all like, "No pictures until E3 starts tomorrow!" So I picked up my wristband for the Sony press conference, and later that day I went to the Los Angeles Sports Memorial Stadium down the street, and holy crap, Sony catered all of the food and drinks, so we ate good before the Sony press conference started. So we got seated inside, and after we saw a lot of trailers for Batman Arkham Origins, Final Fantasy 15, and we finally saw the PS4 reveal.
I'm very proud to announce that PlayStation 4 will be available at $399.
So watching it live on stream is one thing, but seeing it live there was something else entirely. Like, you just had to be there to feel the energy of the room, and how the PS4 reveal literally decimated the Xbox One reveal a few weeks earlier. And I remember Josie texting me to make a really quick video on my thoughts as I was walking back to my car at the Memorial Stadium, which is on my second channel, but it's short enough that I can play here, with all my awkward pauses and stuff. Hey guys, this is Ryan, and I just came out of the Sony press conference, and holy PS4 the win. Yeah, they pretty much kicked Microsoft pretty hard in the balls, and I think I know what system everybody is going to get this fall. Yeah, it was a really good show, really impressive light show. The games were pretty cool. I didn't care much for the, all the movie stuff, but, and to be honest, back in February when they announced the system, I wasn't too impressed with the games, but now I think they've, made them a lot better, and I'm actually looking kind of forward to playing them. So yeah, I think this is kind of the last nail in the coffin for Microsoft at this moment. They're kind of going to be the laughing stock of the entire convention, and possibly, the gaming world. I mean, wow. Holy man. Alright, Ryan out. Holy crap, I was way thinner back then. And sadly, I was never invited to another Sony press conference after this, since my invitation was pretty random. And later on, I found this website, which is gamepress.com, which I'll link in the description below, where they list all the individual contact information for press in the game industry, which I've used several times over the years. And the few times I've contacted Microsoft to attend their press conferences, they would pretty much tell me they're at capacity, which was actually Morse code for saying, "Your YouTube channel isn't big enough, you peon." But that's okay. And Nintendo stopped doing their press conferences after E3 2011 and switched to their online-only Treehouse event, which usually aired on the day that E3 started, and I would miss it every single time because me and my crew would be driving from Orange County to LA and be stuck in LA traffic, so I would have to recap it when we arrived at E3 over the years, and I would still watch the Sony and Microsoft press conferences at home since they were always held before E3 began. Because you're breathtaking! Alright, so day 1 of E3 2013 started on Tuesday, June 11, 2013, so I took Josie, Heather, Frank, and I in my van from Orange County to LA, and on the 405 freeway we passed by this factory in the Torrance area, and it smelled really bad, and Heather said, "Wow, it smells like dead cats." And she was also rambling about how jealous her relatives were on the Midwest, because, she was going to E3 and they weren't, and she was like, if my relatives actually had the ambition to do better things with their lives, they would be here too. And Frank, who barely shows any excitement for anything, was like, "We're going to E3, man! We're going to E3!" And this was the most excited I've ever seen him ever. And I was like, yeah, me too. And I'm so glad that you guys were coming with me to our first E3, because E3 just wasn't my thing. It was our thing. Although that would change a couple of years later. So when we arrived at the Los Angeles Convention Center, holy crap, man, we were in gaming heaven, and I distinctly remember the large Titanfall statue in the main hall with all the people going about, and all of the footage that I recorded here over the years does not give E3 justice. You have to have been there to experience it. It was so amazing that I posted on my Facebook, E3 is my new home. I never want to leave. Which is still true to this day. It's so amazing that I never want to leave, even after the 7 times that I've been there. So in 2013, I got to play Lightning Returns Final Fantasy XIII and also met Ali Hillis, the voice of Lightning, who was super nice. I also got to play Phoenix Wright Dual Destinies, which is the 5th mainline Ace Attorney game, and I also got to play DuckTales Remastered and even sang the theme song in their karaoke booth, which was awesome. And I also met Stuttering Craig, who used to be part of Screw Attack at the DuckTales Remastered booth at Capcom, and I told him the day before on day 0, I saw him, Shad, and Ben from Screw Attack filming outside the convention center, and I also saw some Sony and Microsoft employees get into a verbal argument next to them, which made him laugh. And I saw Dead Rising 3, and I got to play both the Xbox One and the PS4 months before they came out. And I remember playing Killzone and Octodad on the PS4, and I remember seeing Hideo Kojima at the Square Enix booth, but I was way too shy to talk to him. And I also remember on the last day, Frank dressed up all professionally so he can play Final Fantasy XIV A Realm Reborn almost a year before it was about to come out. So, being an absolute newbie to E3, I took a shotgun approach and went to every media section at all the booths and tried to pass out my really bad-looking BGP business card at the time, and I told the media people that we're an up-and-coming YouTube channel, our videos make people buy games, which was true because our old Skyrim videos made people buy the game, but the Bethesda media guy was like, yeah, sure. And I remember passing my card to the Sony press guy, but he kinda handed it back to me, and I can only assume in his head he was like, who the hell is this guy? Oh, those were the days. But the absolute best part of E3 2013 was when Heather was in line at the Eidos Montreal booth. Back when Eidos Montreal was part of Square Enix, she got into an argument with some douchebags in line who insulted her tattoos, but one of the devs who was running the booth came in and stopped the argument, which I still really appreciate to this day, and Heather and the developer got into a cool conversation about her tattoos and how cool they were, especially her Thundercats tattoo, so we got invited to a dinner on the last day at a nearby hotel with the Eidos Montreal / Square Enix people, which Square Enix graciously paid for, by the way. So on our last day of E3 after the event was over, we had dinner with the Square Enix / Eidos Montreal people, and that felt like, we made it guys, we're having dinner with freaking Square Enix at Eidos Montreal! And I had so much fun chatting with all the devs and making new friends, and that truly felt like a sense of accomplishment. So I would say Heather won E3 2013 for us. And let's not forget when I got drunk and started dancing with the Crave Online girls outside the convention center, and that's the reason why Crave Online never came back to E3 after that, all because of my drunken dancing. Well, but before that, I do remember going to the Ouya tent across from the street from the convention center, playing the Ouya, then getting drunk afterwards with the free beer they were offering, then going to dance with the Crave Online girls. So you know what? I completely blame the Ouya. So on the ride home, we were just in so much awe on how amazing our first E3 was, and we all vowed to come back every single year because it was just that much fun. And before then, I only saw what E3 looked like in magazines and the internet, but actually going there was such an amazing experience in itself, and I wouldn't trade that for anything else in the world, because E3 is my new home. I never want to leave. E3 2014. So if I had to choose my absolute favorite E3, it would have to be 2014 because we accomplished so much there in comparison to 2013. So 2014 was an extremely rough year for me because a few months after E3 2013 and in the fall of 2013, I got fired from this really terrible real estate job I was working at the time, and I would definitely say it's the worst work experience I've ever had. So in 2014, I was hopping from temp job to temp job, not knowing how long I'd be working, and I was always worried if I was going to pay the bills or not. And I remember using the Team Kaizen Attitudes Entertainment credentials to apply for E3, but I didn't feel the same excitement getting the approval for my badge because I didn't know if I was going to go. But however, my memories from E3 2013 kept driving me to never give up because I wanted to go back so badly, and luckily the job I was working at the time in 2014 actually let me go to E3 despite only being there a month, mostly because I was upfront and honest about my vacation during my interview, so I was able to go to E3 2014! Hell yeah! So after my newbie experience with E3 2013, I decided not to do the shotgun approach of handing out my business card to all the media people at each booth, who actually never contacted me back, by the way. I started reaching out to companies online months before the event started, and that's how I found GamesPress.com, and this is how I ended up working with Screw Attack to make a fun video, since our channel was partnered with Fullscreen at the time, who owned Screw Attack, and we worked with Chad, who was a great dude to work with, but Craig didn't come in 2014 since he just had another kid. So at E3 2014, I waited 2 hours in line to play Destiny, I waited an hour in line to play Batman Arkham Knight, Lords of the Fallen, and then Super Smash Bros. For the 3DS and the Wii U, which I also won a shirt at, Hotline Miami 2, Killer Instinct on the Xbox One, Sunset Overdrive, and tons more. I also remember playing the Gauntlet game at the Nvidia tent across from the convention center, and Devolver Digital, since they also had a tent too, and they didn't want to pay for the expensive convention center space. And also, we were able to play the first Dragon Ball Xenoverse at the Bandai Namco private room, and the developers were all like, if you ever visit Japan, you can crash at our place and we can give you a tour of Bandai Namco studios in Japan and Japan itself. So we only had 1,300 to 1,500 subscribers at the time, and Bandai Namco themselves was telling us, bro, you can just crash at our place if you ever go to Japan. So how amazing is that? But sadly, we never took them up on their offer, but it was still pretty cool that they were willing to do that for us. And this is also the first year I met Angry Joe in person, while he was waiting for an appointment, and he was super awesome to talk to, and he told me how much he hustles to get interviews at E3, and you gotta keep going if you want to make it on YouTube. And I also remember seeing my good friend John Yamamoto, who I met at E3 2013, and we sang the DuckTales theme in the South Hall, which made employees from Capcom and Sony want to record and take pictures with us. And I also remember meeting Yoshinori Ono back when he was with Capcom, and getting a selfie with him at the Capcom booth. And also, this was the first year we started going to the infamous E3 after parties. Now, I can't remember them all since we went to so many over the years, and sometimes even multiple ones in one night. So I think in 2014 we went to some party for some random indie game in this Mexican bar, and we had some pretty good tacos there for free. And we also did a funny Screw Attack and Battle Geek Plus crossover video where we were trying to save E3, and I remember seeing Conan O'Brien interviewing Naomi Kyle from IGN, and Naomi is super nice, by the way. And I was only inches away from Conan O'Brien, and he wouldn't even look at me like the peon I was. And that was the closest I ever got to Conan O'Brien. And the Square Enix people were super cool and let me play Nosgoth with them in their private room back when they actually owned the franchise, and I still have the Nosgoth mousepad they gave me to this day, and I still use it even though it's been deteriorating over the years. And since I made business contacts before the event, we were able to do a promo video at PDP for Project Delphi. We also did a promo for the Oddworld's Abe's Odyssey people. And now the truly defining moment of them all. We made our very first brand deal with PDP and Nintendo. So at the private PDP meeting room, we showed their people our Gears of Duck Hunt video, and they liked it, and they asked us if we wanted to do a promo for their wired fight pads that were going to come out when Super Smash Bros. For the Wii U was going to be released. While PDP did most of the coordination, Nintendo themselves had to look at our channel to see if we were a good fit. But hey, earlier that year, I did sign up for the now defunct Nintendo Creators Program on YouTube, where Nintendo took a little ad revenue if we used their games, and luckily Nintendo liked our channel so much that they approved us to help make the promo, and actually cleared the usage rights for the Smash Bros. Footage and music for our video without having to register the promo through the Nintendo Creators Program, so we were able to monetize Smash Bros. For the Wii U footage and music on Nintendo's blessing. But man, out of the big three of Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony, it's hard to believe that Nintendo, the very company that defined my childhood, was the first of the big three we worked with as influencers, and we were literally on cloud 9 in 2014, even with only 1,300 to 1,500 subscribers, where even bigger channels who are hundreds or even thousands of times bigger than us have a lot of trouble getting any type of promotional deal with Nintendo, all because I made the effort to contact companies personally before E3 even started. And even after E3 2014 was over, we still had to wait for Nintendo and PDP to work things out to approve our channel and get us the wired fight pads, and that took until November of 2014 to finally get the video done, because deals like this take months to get done. And we were also told that Nintendo really loved our promo, but sadly we never got to work with them again since then. So E3 2014 ended up being our most successful year, and my personal favorite E3 of them all, because I came in with a better approach on contacting companies rather than shotgun blasting my really bad business card all around. We got to collab with Screw Attack and made brand deals with PDP and Nintendo, so E3 2014 was an absolute winner.
A winner is you!
E3 2015. Now, E3 2015 wasn't as fun as the previous 2 years at no fault of the event itself, but rather because of the Channel Awesome audience. So in 2015, Battle Geek Plus was part of Channel Awesome after we got selected in their 2014 talent pickup, and I made a video called the Channel Awesome Capcom Bidding War, which was inspired by a rumor that Capcom was being sold, which didn't end up being true. But on social media, I started seeing people on Twitter coming up with theories that Nintendo was gonna buy Capcom, and I wanted to do a Channel Awesome Bidding War version of that. So I made the very smart, aka one of the worst decisions, to release the video during E3 2015, and holy crap, when that video was released, the entire Channel Awesome fanbase crucified me. It was very hard for me to enjoy E3 2015 because every time I was waiting in line, I was checking my phone, and then I started checking the feedback on the Channel Awesome Capcom Bidding War on YouTube and on their website, which was really devastating to say the least. I probably would have enjoyed E3 2015 a million times more if I didn't check the feedback on that video every waking second of the day. And I also remember checking my phone when we were having dinner at Hooters across the convention center and just hanging my head down in shame looking at the Channel Awesome Capcom Bidding War feedback rather than enjoying the festivities at Hooters of all places. However, I will give this story a happy ending since after we did our cameo for the Nostalgia Critic Hocus Pocus video, people found our channel and started liking the Channel Awesome Capcom Bidding War after that, so it all worked out in the end. But I'm really glad I left Channel Awesome after the fallout in 2018, so I don't have to deal with their really awful fanbase anymore. But I already talked about that in another video, so back to E3 2015. So this was the first year we decided to get a hotel in LA rather than driving an hour back and forth from Orange County to LA every day, which was a million times more convenient, and we got to eat at the amazing Nickel Diner, which I highly recommend, especially their maple bacon donuts. However, there was this one time we were walking back to our hotel, and I saw this one dude just lying on the sidewalk like he was passed out or dead. Now, people lying down on the sidewalk in downtown Los Angeles is a pretty normal thing since they're mostly homeless, but this guy was decked out in a suit like he was some kind of mafia boss or something, and he was lying on the ground, so I hope he didn't have a heart attack or anything. So in 2015, I got to play Dark Souls 3, Mighty Number 9, Dragon Quest Heroes, and the Mega Man Legacy Collection, and Bethesda had large displays for both Doom 2016 and Fallout 4 at their booth, but they didn't have them playable even though we were able to order Fallout 4 the weekend before E3 2015 started. And one of the biggest highlights is when I went to the Nintendo booth and I saw Nathan Barnett, who most people know for his Keith Apicary character and all the other crazy character he plays, and he invited me to dance with him. But however, I was holding my camera at the time, so I told Josie to dance with him and I recorded him, and he was super awesome. And so I got to play Star Fox Zero and Super Mario Maker, and oh man, the gigantic booth that Nintendo had for Super Mario Maker was like Super Nintendo World at Universal Studios before it existed, and you just had to be there to experience it all, because my video does not do it justice. And then I waited 5 hours in line at the Microsoft booth with my friend Dean for the HoloLens and Halo 5 demonstration, and all we heard the entire time was "Requisition stations" for 5 hours non-stop. Requisition stations! And the HoloLens and Halo 5 demo were definitely not worth it, and I wonder what happened to the HoloLens after all this time, and at the time of this video it's been around 8 years or so, Microsoft. And I also got to play Street Fighter V early, and they had this insane setup with a circle of DSLR cameras where I got this video taken.
Round 1, fight!
And last but not least, I got a pic with me and Koji Igarashi of Castlevania and Bloodstained fame. As for after parties, it's hard to remember which ones we went to this year, but I do remember going to a Loot Crate party that was on this roof. Are they even still around anymore? According to my Google searching, they are, but I never hear anybody talking about them anymore. And aside from the bad comments on the Channel Awesome Capcom Bidding War video that kinda ruined my entire E3 2015 experience for me, I still had a great time, and it was still a solid event overall. E3 2016. So E3 2016 was the last normal E3, meaning that it was an industry event only before the general public was able to buy tickets to attend in 2017 and forward. And I remember when I arrived at E3 2016, it was all cloudy, and I saw Pro Jared and his crew getting out of a taxi, and after the event was over, Pro Jared said something on Twitter like, "E3, mediocre. Yeah, this was before the drama with him and his ex-wife, but I won't get into that. So we started out E3 2016 differently this year, since when I emailed Bandai Namco, they told me to register at their media booth upstairs above South Hall. So when we saw everyone beelining for the annual E3 door rush when the event opened, which we would participate in the next day, we immediately went to the Bandai Namco media booth, which is a floor above, and registered for their private showcase in their private room, where we got to see Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2 and Tekken 7, and sadly the awesome Dragon Ball Xenoverse developer who we met at E3 and offered us to crash at his place wasn't there that year, but it was all good. So the games we played at E3 2016 were Final Fantasy 15, Dead Rising 4, and Capcom had this really amazing booth for Phoenix Wright Spirit of Justice, which is the 6th mainline Ace Attorney game. But the biggest highlight of E3 2016 was playing The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild months before it came out on the Wii U, because this was months before the Nintendo Switch was revealed. So after doing all of our recording and game playing on day 1, we woke up early on day 2 and lined up outside the West Hall so we can participate in the opening E3 rush, but we called this one the Zelda Rush since we wanted to line up for Zelda because the lines were about 9+ hours long if you came at normal times, and holy crap, we were like a stampede beelining it to the Nintendo booth to line up for Zelda. Oh, and I also met Charles Martinet here. So what was the entire Zelda Breath of the Wild experience like at E3 2016? Well, I'm just gonna play the entire Zelda part from our old E3 2016 video.
Magical world of Zelda. Welcome to the shrine.
We are playing Zelda. We are playing Zelda!
We just played the new Zelda game, Breath of Wild Breath, Bad Breath. It's the new Zelda game. It's amazing. And I don't know, Ryan, what do you think?
It's The Legend of Zelda and it's really rad. Those creatures from Ganon are pretty bad. Those Octoroks, Tektites, and Levers too. And this spring you can play it on your Wii U.
Give me that.
Man, I remember editing this and almost crying because it was such a beautiful experience, and like I said before, Nintendo really knows how to make a giant booth experience like Super Nintendo World at Universal Studios. Yeah, so maybe all of these E3 booths were like training to build an actual amusement park. And I forgot to mention this earlier, I got to play We Happy Few and Cuphead there. So one thing I didn't like about E3 2016 was when I was waiting in line for my Horizon Zero Dawn appointment at the Sony booth, this one dude was running in the convention center in the West Hall, and you know, running in a convention is a big no-no, and almost bumped into me and triggered a panic attack, and I was having trouble breathing. And luckily, I caught my breath and recovered right away since the people next to me were like, "Oh my god, do you want us to call for help?" Which was very, very much appreciated. But luckily I was able to recover, but thanks to them for, being concerned. But that dude who was running and almost bumped into me, I hope you tripped and fell into a garbage can in a hilarious Jackass or Looney Tunes style, because you totally deserve that. Sorry, not sorry. So for the after parties, we went to the Twitch party at the Belasco Theater, which was really awesome, and I got to see Andre the Black Nerd again, and we tried to get into the IGN party the next day, and if you wanted to get in, you had to register on their website, but the problem is they just let anybody register on their website, and they had way too many people register, and there was this massively long line outside of the venue, and you pretty much had to wait 2 to 3 hours out in the cold, so we decided not to go, and as they say, you can't spell ignorant without IGN. And on the last day, we went to this crowded bar with a whole bunch of Rocksteady developers, and we thanked them for their work on the Batman Arkham games. Yes, even Batman Arkham Knight, with its way too much Batmobile parts. Yeah. So with E3 2016 over, E3 would never be the same again since they started letting the general public in 2017. Regardless, E3 2016 was a better experience than E3 2015 for me. E3 2017. Now, if I had to say what my least favorite E3 was, it has to be E3 2017. Now, don't get me wrong, I still had a fun time at E3 2017. But it was just so different this year because they let the general public buy badges, and you were able to differentiate the general public and industry. So the industry had the clear plastic badges, and the general public, aka Gen Pop, had orange or yellow badges. I forget the color since it changes every year. And oh boy, well, past E3s were crowded, but you can still navigate them. E3 2017 was nearly Anime Expo levels of crowded, and that's why I don't go back to Anime Expo anymore. It's just way too crowded. And it was just so hard to traverse both the South and West Hall with the massive crowd. And I remember going to the Capcom booth for my Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite appointment in their private room so I wouldn't have to wait in the long lines for it. But there was this one big overweight dude who smelled like con funk, which means he obviously didn't take a shower. And if you're wondering what con funk smells like, it's like a mix between rotten cheese and human flesh. Ugh. And this dude was complaining that he should be let into the private rooms because he was like,
I've been buying Capcom games since I was a kid and I don't want to wait in line to play Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite.
And the poor media person at Capcom looked utterly horrified, like she didn't know what to do. So I talked to her and said, oh hey, I have my appointment for Capcom at this time. Yeah, mostly because I contacted Capcom, months before E3. And she let me in, and the big fat dude had this big look of anger on his face, like he was gonna jump me after my appointment. But luckily that didn't happen. But oh boy, that set the precedent of what E3 2017 was gonna be like. And I remember setting up an appointment for Modus Games to preview Extinction, and they were super nice to talk to, and in 2018 when the game came out they gave me a free key to review the game, and they said I could be as honest as I want in my review, but I kinda poo-pooed on the game, and I haven't worked with Modus since, but they were still pretty nice. And the giant crowds were so bad that Frank, who used to be excited to go to E3 back in 2013, said he didn't want to come back anymore, and hasn't been back ever since. And on day 2, I did not go on the show floor the entire day and spent the entire day at the Novo, where Microsoft holds their Xbox Fan Fest, watching panels, which was a million times more relaxing. And there was a panel with Ed Boon, one of the creators of Mortal Kombat, and this one fan asked him if he can sign his Mortal Kombat on the Sega Genesis, and Ed Boon said no. And you can tell this guy was a Gen Pop attendee since he didn't know that E3 was more of a business trade show rather than a normal convention where guests usually have autograph panels. No autograph-tality! And I also remember having a good time watching this awesome panel with Guillermo del Toro and Hideo Kojima, and Kojima said, if people have no idea what you're talking about, you're on the right track. And that line totally resonated with me so hard. Yeah, because even though Kojima is a million times more intellectual than my peon brain will ever be, we're so much alike in that fashion, and you can see that in my past videos and even in my game dev. And I guarantee people still have no idea what I'm talking about. So after watching panels all day in day 2, I went to our appointment with our good friends at PDP, and that's how we started getting their Pixel Pals for free, which I featured in so many of our videos from that time period. And as for the games we played, aside from Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, which I poo-pooed on, sorry Capcom, I got free codes for Lawbreakers since I was a huge fan of Cliff Bleszinski, and definitely read his book Control Freak, and he even passed by me while I was walking in the West Hall, but I was too shy to talk to him, and I didn't want to interrupt him if he had somewhere to go. And I also got to play Super Mario Odyssey, Sonic Forces, and Dragon Ball FighterZ, which was definitely the highlight game of the convention. So for the after parties, I think we went to the Sony LBGT tea party, which was really loud, and you couldn't have any conversations with people there, but I still had fun dancing there anyways. And I can't even remember any of the after parties since we went to so many in 2017 and it was all a blur. Yeah, so 2017, my least favorite E3, but I still had a fun time there regardless. E3 2018. So for E3 2018, the ESA made the decision to let the industry in 2 hours earlier before the general public, and that made it a million times easier to navigate, and the crowds were a bit more under control this year, which was nice. And sadly, because of the bad experience Frank had at E3 2017, he decided not to come this year, so it was only Josie, Heather, and I. So this was the first year I didn't do our yearly E3 video, since having to record those videos was so tiring every year, and having to lug my DSLR camera and microphone around, recording every part of E3 and barely using any of the footage. In 2017, I mostly used my phone to record and edit even during the times I was waiting in line, and I was editing videos to post on our channel, since it was so much more convenient and I could still upload when E3 was still going on and still relevant, because E3 videos have to be done fast, because the relevancy dies out as soon as the convention is over. In all honesty, I was more interested in taking pics for Instagram rather than recording videos that nobody was really watching anyways. And there were times from E3 2013 to E3 2017 where I would just tell myself I would just love for one day to not bring my camera equipment and just have fun walking around the event and take pics, but I would never listen to myself and I would end up so tired each day after recording all that footage. Thankfully, I didn't lug my DSLR camera and equipment for E3 2018, and I had a far more relaxing time because of that. Yeah, so as for the games we played in E3 2018, Josie and I waited an hour in line to play Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and I also waited an hour in line to play Dragon Quest XI and Mega Man 11, and I was also invited to Sony's private lounge where I got to play Marvel's Spider-Man, Concrete Genie, Dreams, and Tetris Effect in VR. And there was a huge line for the Resident Evil 2 remake, which I heard was over 4 to 5 hours long, but I decided it was just better to take pictures with the zombies. And I also made an appointment to play Super Smash Bros. Ultimate without having to wait in the lines, but it didn't feel as impactful as Super Smash Bros. For the Wii U and 3DS back at E3 2014, since they didn't have prizes like shirts to hand out, and we were only able to play for 3 minutes and had to leave, but they did give me a cool Smash Bros. Logo pin. And I also remember trying to take a pic with the Norman Reedus statue at the Death Stranding display, and the Japanese lady who was taking my picture yelled at me in broken English saying, "No touch Norman Reedus!" Which I quickly complied to. And I also made an appointment with Bandai Namco to play Jump Force early, which is another game I poo-pooed on in a review. But hey, Bandai Namco still invited me to their booth again the next year, so I think we were still pretty cool back then. And as for the after parties, I can't really remember the ones we went to aside from this event, but on day 2 I went to this gathering off-site at a nearby bar called the Big Indie Pitch, where indie game developers would try to pitch their ideas to investors, and my friends from Team Kaizen Attitudes Entertainment tried to pitch their games, but to no avail. And people there were asking me if I was a game dev, and I told them, I'm just here for moral support from my game dev friends, but deep inside, man, I was like, man, maybe I should really get back into game dev, but I'm still focused on the stupid YouTube channel. Yeah, because all the game devs there showed me all their super cool games, and that was really tempting for me, but my focus was still on the show at that point. So overall, while E3 2018 was a little crowded, it was a way better experience than E3 2017. E3 2019. So this was the last normal E3 at the time of making this video, and it was a very different one. Sony and Microsoft decided to pull out while Sony didn't have anything this week, and Microsoft moved their booth to their own Microsoft Theater across the street so they wouldn't have to deal with the really expensive E3 floor fees. So West Hall, where the big three used to be, Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo, was way smaller this year, and an esports booth took up the spot where Sony used to be while Nintendo was in the corner. And this was the first year I went by myself since Frank didn't want to come back, and Josie and Heather had to find new jobs so they weren't able to go. So sadly, this was no longer our thing, man. E3 was always our thing with the old crew. Although I do have to admit that it was very nice to have an entire hotel room to myself the entire time. So on day one I met up with some other friends and we participated in the annual E3 rush where we all rushed the front door as soon as the event opened, and we were able to make it and play the Final Fantasy VII Remake demo early, and I was able to see a demonstration of the Square Enix Avengers game where I said, wow, these guys look like the knockoff Avengers since they couldn't get the likeness of the MCU actors. And I also waited in line for an hour and a half to play Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, and I also had an appointment to play Luigi's Mansion 3, which is really awesome, and I didn't exactly finish the game until this year in 2023. And as for the day one after parties, I went to a Black Desert event at the Regal Theater next to the convention center, and while it was interesting, I still haven't played the game, but I did get free popcorn and soda along with some really stale ham and crackers, which was my dinner for the night. Yeah, so for the after parties for the other 2 days, I remember going to this bar where I had trouble hearing people and I couldn't have a conversation with someone I was talking to, but after that we just decided, you know what, we're just gonna have dinner at Denny's. So on day 2 I did the E3 rush into the Nintendo booth just like for E3 2016 for Breath of the Wild, so I can get in early for Link's Awakening for the Switch, and I also got to meet Erin Bozon, who is the co-creator of the Shantae games with her husband Matt Bozon, who Heather interviewed at E3 2017, and Heather was the main reason why I started playing the Shantae games. And there was this huge line for the CD Projekt Red booth for Cyberpunk 2077, which I heard was over 8 hours long, but I didn't want to waste my time there, and I'm glad I didn't because we all know how Cyberpunk 2077 turned out, but I do plan to finish the game one day since now it's more of a playable game. And I also got to play Pokemon Sword and Shield even though I'm not a Pokemon fan, and I also got to see a ton of arcade 1-up machines and played Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games, and sadly this would be the last E3 that I would go to for now. But overall, E3 2019 was super chill and I really enjoyed it, and I think if Josie and Heather came with me, I think they would have enjoyed it a lot too. E3 2020. Not really much to say about E3 2020, but Josie and Heather finally got good jobs and were able to come this year after they missed last year, and after turning in the credentials, I got us a better hotel at Little Tokyo, and was excited to come back until, yeah, the pandemic happened. So E3 2020 was cancelled, breaking my long 7+ year streak of going to E3. So E3 2021 and 2022 were no-shows, and I know they had special access to access trailers and panels and whatnot if I registered as industry, but I didn't even bother since I would have rather attended an actual live event rather than watch it all online. E3 2023. So in 2022, it was announced that ReedPop, who handles PAX and New York Comic Con, were taking over E3, and we're going to extend it to 4 days this time in June, with 2 days for industry and 2 days for the general public, which was definitely a good decision after that disaster that was 2017. So I was having Thanksgiving dinner in 2022 with Josie, Heather, and Frank, and after telling them that we would have 2 days for just industry, they all wanted to come back. Even Frank, who stopped going after 2017. It was like I was getting the old band back together, man. So Josie and Heather also moved to Little Tokyo, so we were going to have a free place to crash near the LA Convention Center, and I was actually planning to cook for 2 days so we can have a nice homemade meal rather than everyone spending expensive amounts of money at the restaurants. And I also established Battle Geek Plus as a legitimate business as an LLC at the start of 2023, so I can finally apply with my own banner rather than using Team Kaizen Attitudes Entertainment, who helped us get in our first 7 years, and I'm forever grateful to them. And even Team Kaizen was actually going to come back to E3 in 2023 after they stopped going in 2018 and they didn't come in 2019, so 2023 was going to be a huge family reunion with me, Josie, Heather, and Frank, and my Team Kaizen friends. And this was actually going to be the very first year that I didn't have any business plans, since I stopped focusing on the influencer side of things and I was just going to go as a game dev and have fun playing all the new games and hopefully meeting some new game devs. And I also wanted to chat with my Team Kaizen buddies about game dev too, since they were a huge part of why I came back to game dev. So I registered with my own credentials, and this was finally going to be the first year my badge was going to say Ryan Molina, Battle Geek Plus LLC, baby. And then E3 got canceled. No. This can't be happening. This can't be happening. So this year was going to be a very special year for me because not only did I finally start my own game development company, Battle Geek Plus LLC, this was going to be my 10-year anniversary of when I first went in 2013. So I was extremely devastated to hear the news, but I decided for this week when this video came out, which would have been the week of E3 2023, I would still take a vacation to go to Disneyland, Universal Studios, so I can go to Super Nintendo World, which would be like going to Nintendo's past E3 booths, see some movies, and hang out with Josie and Heather in Little Tokyo. So we'll have our own event called LT3, Little Tokyo 3, Little Tokyo and the three of us going around, with the blackjack and the booze and all that jazz. Yeah, I mean, we can go to, the World 8-2 game store and have our own E3 there. Yeah, so to write this video, I had to look through all my old E3 footage, my Instagram pictures, and it made me realize, man, I totally miss E3 so much. Because ever since I was a kid, I wanted to go so bad, and I was finally able to go 7 times, and I still feel like it wasn't enough because there's so much to do at every single E3 that it's impossible to do everything in the short week that it happens. And I never had the credentials to go back in the past, and it still felt super unreal that we were able to go thanks to Team Kaizen and Attitudes Entertainment. And this year, in 2023, I was finally able to go under my own banner until it got cancelled. But every single year that we went, it felt like we made it, man. And it was the thing that I would look forward to every single year more than anything else. And being at E3 really felt like I was in a large gathering with my own people, and I felt welcome there, where I definitely don't feel this way in the outside world. And those 3 days of pure gaming bliss and hanging out with like-minded people always felt like heaven to me. And while it did feel a bit long starting from day one, it also felt very short at the same time when it ended. And I would always get post-con depression, but I would be like, well, it's just another 364 days until the next E3. And if I gotta be honest, man, E3 was way more important to me than Christmas and New Year's. I was very lucky to even go for the first time in 2013, and even luckier in 2014 when I had trouble holding a job. Yeah, but to go 7 times from 2013 to 2019 was a miracle. And even though there were some E3s that weren't as good as others, I still had a blast every single time, regardless, even in 2015 and 2017. And also, the weather during E3 was always in the middle of June gloom, so the weather was usually on the cooler side of things before the July heat wave here in California. There were some days at E3 that got hot but not scorching, but you still needed a jacket at night since it got cold, but I always felt like the weather was just right for E3. And I also remember making business appointments every year and feeling super important because I was making deals for the channel, and I really learned a lot about the business side of things while being an influencer. And I got to work with and be invited to private meetings by a lot of amazing companies like PDP, Nintendo, Sony, Capcom, Square Enix, Bandai Namco, and a ton more, even as a small YouTuber with under 10k subscribers, since that in-person element is much more than having to talk through normal emails. And I really learned how to present myself for business opportunities, and I'm extremely grateful for every opportunity I was able to get at E3. And E3 used to be the big Super Bowl event for gaming where companies would wait for the event to show and preview their upcoming games, and it was always cool to tell my friends that I was able to play certain games early at E3 months or even years before they came out. But sadly, due to the advent of Twitch and live streaming and social media, companies are able to get information out a million times faster than waiting for E3. It's far easier to reach millions of people instantly with a stream rather than having a booth at E3 and only reaching thousands of people there. And the writing on the wall for E3 was even as far back as 2012, when Nintendo opted out of doing a presentation and just had their online Nintendo Treehouse events. But sadly, E3 was no longer able to keep up with the times, and it can no longer serve its original purpose anymore. So, do I think E3 is dead? Well, I don't think the E3 name will die because it's so synonymous with gaming in general, but I think E3 really just needs to become PAX California at this point, so I don't need to travel to PAX West or East or anywhere else. At the time of this video, I still haven't been to a PAX, but I've always wanted to go since Repop is now running E3, and so maybe they can consider just running a PAX California or something equivalent. So will E3 come back in 2024? I'm honestly not going to bet on it, but if it does come back, then great. I'll still register with my credentials, but other than that, I'm just going to start going to other events like GDC, Gamescom in Europe, Tokyo Game Show, PAX, and other gaming conventions to fill in the gap that E3 used to inhabit. And if E3 is just done for good, I'll always have fond memories of the 7 years that I went and will always hold them dearly. So E3, thanks for making me feel proud to be part of the gaming community. And the people who usually crap on E3 every year are the ones who just never go and are just keyboard warriors trying to act all edgy. Believe me, if they went in person, I think their tune would definitely change. Or they'll just call it mediocre like Pro Jared did because of preconceived notions, but who cares about people like that? So here's a picture of all my E3 badges with the Team Kaizen Attitudes Entertainment banner, and maybe one day if E3 ever comes back, my badge will finally say Battle Geek Plus LLC on it, because I was hoping 2023 would finally be the year, but alas, it was not meant to be. And this E3 lunchbox I bought in 2014 holds a lot of my con swag, and I have a ton of E3 specific swag, so maybe one day I'll do a video on all of it. So if you want to check out all of our past E3 videos from 2013 to 2017, I'll be linking the playlist down below, and I admit, I was getting pretty nostalgic and a bit teary-eyed watching it all again. So with that said, this ends this episode of Awesome Video Game Memories about my time at E3, and we'll see what the future holds for the E3 name. I'm Ryan, so thanks for watching, and see you later, gamers! E3 is my new home. I never want to leave. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and make sure to check out these other videos, and also make sure to follow me on social media and check out the official Battle Geek Plus website. Take care.